Remember, as Francis Hasselbein taught the world, who you are as a human being is going to have more to do with your success on what you do than anything else. And that's why the culture of Love by Design is so important.
Welcome back to Corporate Competitor Podcast. Now, if you haven't listened to part one of my conversation with legendary Boeing and Ford CEO Alan Mulally, I highly recommend you check it out first. It really sets the stage for everything we're about to cover in today's edition. As always, download my favorite quotes from today's episode on corporatecompetitorpodcast.com/notes and drop your favorite part of the conversation into the comments. When we left our conversation in the last episode, Alan was describing the early culture at Ford, and now we're picking up with what happened next as he implemented his working together system. Enjoy. One of the questions we have asked for over almost 5 years of doing this podcast is around the concept of teams. You've already made reference to this. Even if you're in an individual sport, you're part of a team. But one of I've discovered in my work in the corporate world as a presenter and speaker is I think the word teams is overused. I think some people refer to a team when all they really are is a bunch of people with the same business card, right? It's not a true team as you know them and I know them. But if you were coaching up someone like myself, I'm a new leader, I've got a group of people, I've got to form into a team. What are some of the very early things I should do to begin building that individual group into one?
Okay, do I have a thought for you about this, which is the essence of working
together.
Okay, the working together leadership and management system.
And I have it here.
And the title, when you notice the title too, Don, are working together principles and practices and connected, collaborative, and aligned culture of Love by Design. So you can see this covers everything that we have talked about up until this point. And you can see the hour in the front. See, it's not me.
Yep.
It's our, to your point, it's our, it's everybody that's involved. And the principles are who you are, the B part. The practices are what you do and how you do it.
Right.
Remember, as Francis Hasselbein taught the world, who you are as a human being is going to have more to do with your success on what you do than anything else. And that's why the culture of Love by Design is so important. And now you look down below, and this is what every person that I've ever worked with at Boeing and at Ford and all the suppliers, every one of them has this slide. And look at this. Here is the one Ford.
One team.
One team, one plan, one goal. And look at the back of this. Here is the principles and practices.
Wow.
And the behaviors. They organize that, and look at over on the left-hand side, FORD. And I'll be glad to send that to you too. And everybody they carried it around. It was in every room around the world when I was at Ford. And so look at the first one, people first, love them up. I had, when CEOs saw this, I had CEOs say to me, Alan, people first, love them up. Love them up. I've never seen a CEO say the word or use the word love. Are you looking for a date? I said, no, I'm not looking for a date. I love humanity. Okay, now I'm here to serve. And then look at the next one. Everyone is included. Everyone is included. And then, like we talked about, what's our compelling vision, our comprehensive strategy, our relentless positive implementation? Never negative. We're going to implement this. We're going to create this 777 with 4 million parts, or this F-150 with 10,000 parts. And we're going to do it all together. And of course, it's a creative, innovative product. And so change is not something we're concerned about. We welcome it because that's what innovation is about. That's what continuous improvement is all about. And then clear performance goal, one plan. Most companies have multiple plans.
And
Facts and data. We love the facts and data. We also want to know what you think, because when we have an issue, we want to take advantage of your facts and data also. Now, to your other point, look on the right-hand side. Expect the unexpected and expect to deal with it. Holy cow, in a positive way. Very rare in any organization, because everybody wants it to be exactly the same. And the world is changing, your innovation is changing, and so you welcome it. And this one is really unique. Everyone knows the plan. They know the status of the plan, and they know the areas in special attention. Really, everyone? Who's everyone? All of the stakeholders. And so that's what the business plan review is about. Every week, I'm leading a business plan review. I've done it for 47 years, wherever I've been. 47 years of serving at Boeing and Ford, where the whole team is there. We're going through the vision, the strategy, the plan. Every member of the team presents their part of that. They actually color code it, so we all know how it's going. Green, it's on their plan. Yellow, they have an issue, but they have a solution. This item is red, but they are working on it. And we also decide, does it need special attention? They just tell us, because they're the leader.
Yeah.
They're not red or yellow. They are beautiful green. They are fabulous. And so then propose a plan, positive, find a way attitude. Now you can imagine what this, if you have to operate this way, think of what that means to your values and your beliefs. See, it all moves now in a really positive way. Emotion, respect each other, listen to each other, help each other, appreciate each other. Very complicated, Don, very complicated. See, they're not values and beliefs, or people are wondering what they are. We can see this in everybody. Emotional resilience, trust this process and each other, and have fun, enjoy the journey and each other. Now, the real key to this that's also described in the leadership management system is zero tolerance for violating any one of these principles and practices. And if you get to decide, we train everybody up. Everybody has a coach. We have a continuous improvement plan for everybody, including me. We each have 2 or 3 items, everybody, every year, about what we can do that we all think will improve our effectiveness and our group. And so you get to decide. And here's kind of how that decides. I've had a couple of senior leaders that were real command and control. I asked them about whether they're going to move to this direction. They said, Alan, we've done really well. I've been promoted. I make a lot of money. I'm command and control. I tell everybody what to do. And I said, do you see us getting in the way of our business plan review? People are scared to death now. They can't talk and share and everything. And he said, well, yeah, but, I'm really important. And I said, are you ready to change? We'll get your coach to move towards working together in these principles and practices. And they said, and a couple of them, or a few of them said, no, Alan, I don't think I can do it. And I said, and I always would say, it's okay. And what they would say to me is, oh, Alan, that's great. It's okay because I'm so important that I can act this way and I don't have to operate this way. And I said, no, that's not quite what I mean by okay. I mean, it's okay that you are deciding to go serve somewhere else. It's okay. I've never fired anybody, Don. They all get to decide. And I also say to them, oh, and by the way, look at the number 1 principle and practice. Love them up.
People first.
People first. I still love you. You're a neat human being. You're intelligent. You've made a lot of contribution. We just need you to further develop your capability to operate this way, to help everybody else operate this way, so we can take our performance and our creating value and growth to another level. And over time, over this whole time, I've had very few people that didn't move in this direction.
Well,
And
you don't have to say that very often. It's okay if you want to go serve somewhere else to have people realize like, hey, this is the direction we're going, and you can be on the team, or you can go play for another team.
well, and think of what it means when they decide to go this way, and they have this whole team, starting with the leadership team, which
Mhm.
includes everybody. We have all the functional leaders, engineering, manufacturing, procurement, business. We have the business unit leaders in the matrix organization. So, like in Boeing or Ford's case, the business associated with the Americas, Asia Pacific, Europe, and then with all the skill teams, and they're all on that team, and they're all in that business plan review meeting every week going through this. And then, so you can imagine, and you're back next week, and you see everybody has everything memorized.
Right.
And then if you have a red item and you need help, then we have 4 special attention meetings, one on strategy, one on product, another one on process, one anything about people. And then we have the same team all together following that business plan review that helps them solve that issue. Now, because we do that all together, we reduce all the number of meetings that we have by over 50%. And so you can imagine, and also every one of the leaders and their skill, like engineering or procurement or operations, they also cover what's going on in the world and what's going
Right.
on with the competitors. So we're never surprised. Like just like when we went through when GM and Chrysler went into bankruptcy through the horrible economic situation in 2008. And we were watching them. We knew that ahead of time. We worked on that ahead of time. That's why we didn't ask for government money. And that's why we were ahead of them on recovering from the recession. Yeah.
You know, one of the things that I love about, and I want to ask a BPR question in just a minute, but one of the first things I want to mention is to those who might be just listening in our audio version of this podcast. We actually, over on our YouTube channel, the Corporate Competitor Podcast YouTube channel, have the slides that Alan is talking about here. So if you'll go over there, you can actually see in the video version of today's podcast the slides that he's making reference to, so you can actually capture the exact words that he's built into this plan. You know, one of the things, Alan, that it really strikes me is, you know, Coach Wooden, John Wooden, and I worked together for many years, and we wrote a book together, and he talked a lot about the importance of repetition as a leader, right? You know, everything you do, you have to repeat it, repeat it, repeat it. This concept that you would go back over this every
The ultimate
week.
the ultimate of it.
Yeah, the idea that every week you would be in that is really important. You know, I want to go back to when you arrived at Ford. One of the reporters called you out at one of those early press conferences for driving a Lexus. And not long after, Ford executives were driving competitor vehicles because you encouraged them to study the competition, right? That if all you were doing was just paying attention. I love that, because that's a masterclass in how to scout your competition. Talk to me about how that was received. Again, very antithetical to what the industry had told itself it had to be. How did that go?
That's a great story that you just told, and great question. And to start with the story, so at that same press conference, the very first one, that was another question that they asked. What kind of car do you drive, Mr. Mulally? I said, I drive a Lexus. And they said, why do you drive a Lexus? And I said, because it's the finest car in the world. We have a great relationship with Toyota, and we've been working together with them since Henry Ford was working with them at the start of Lexus and of Toyota and Ford. And they said, and I said, it's the finest car in the world. They said, well, what does that mean to us? And what's that mean to you arriving here with us? I said, I'm here to help us create the finest vehicles in the world. And the next day, another headline, I think we got the right guy. And so what you just said is absolutely key. When I drove in into the world headquarters. I drove down below into the basement, and all the vehicles were there of all of the executives. They're in the building. And I hadn't met them yet. And there was not a Ford vehicle there. Aston Martin, Jaguar, Land Rover, Volvo. They're all Ford vehicles because we owned all those companies at the time, but no Ford vehicles. And so when we decided to focus on Ford, and we sold all those other brands so we could focus on Ford, which was 75% of the business, which got everybody focused on Ford now and having a complete family of small, medium, large, and cars, utilities, and trucks. We had the finest. We ended up with the number one brand in the United States, the number one automobile business in the United States, and the fastest growing around the world based on these fantastic products. But the most important thing was that everybody really understood the competition. So I asked them, so I want you to drive a competitor vehicle and all of our new ones when we're developing them. I want you to do that every day and then write down what you think, send it to the engineering and manufacturing people. And so we learn everything we possibly can about the competition. And because we want to create the finest cars and trucks in the world. And we ended up doing it and becoming the number one brand in the United States.
Before we continue, I want to remind you that if one of your 2025 goals is writing a book, but you don't know where to start, I'm here to help. In my new role as publisher at Forbes Books, I'm working alongside a world-class team to guide aspiring authors like you through the process of getting published. Whether it's a story, a big idea, or a project close to your heart, now's the time to make it happen. Just visit forbesbooks.com/Don to get started. I love it. I do want to go back to one more question about the business plan reviews, because I love this anecdote that I read while we were preparing for you. In your very first business plan review session that you led with the team, you noted that every executive presented only positive results to you, right? Despite the fact that, as you know, you were walking into a company that was getting ready to lose $17 billion. And so they're only telling you this good stuff, even though clearly it's not just good stuff. You called them out on it. And tell us the story of the next meeting and how that began to shift the culture because of what you were making note of.
This is a really important question, Don, because when I arrived, I shared everything about the working together leadership management system. It's exactly like this conversation that I'm having with you. All the same great questions that you were asking, because they want to know about me. They want to know about the process. They want to know the expectations of them, what the vision was, what the strategy is going to be. They want to do, and what our implementation plan is, the BPR. And so I shared with them that one of the elements is a business plan review. And we're going to meet every week. We're going to have the entire team there from around the world. And we're going to review the vision, the strategy, the plan, and the status. And we're going to color code. And every one of you are going to be talking, not me. I'm just facilitating it. And we're going to go through, everybody is going to share where they are and the status. And so that we all know what it is, and we can all help each other turn the reds to yellows to greens. And just keep remembering, you guys, you're not red, you're green. It's just the item that you have, and it's an innovative process, and we expect that. And so we start the business plan review. I select the team. We start the business plan reviews, and you're absolutely right. We had 300 charts. All 300 were green. So for the first time, though, within the first couple of weeks, the finance people shared a $17 billion loss. First time that all the people knew that we're going to lose $17 billion.
They didn't know it?
They didn't know it because we hadn't shared that at that point in time. We hadn't shared that with it wasn't our financial timing to share that with everybody, with the government and everybody else. And so everybody's looking at that. And so but they still have all green charts. And so the next week, um, uh, they're all green again. And I said, maybe on the second week, I said, team, again, very nicely smiling and loving them up. I said, you didn't know this before, but we're losing $17 billion. And is there anything in your area or responsibility that is not going well? Eye contact goes to the floor, goes down. They're looking down. And then I said, so you guys, it's really important because we can't move forward together unless we all know what the situation is. And each of you know the situation in your area better than anybody else. Mm-hmm. See, now all of the leaders can't bring in other people to talk. They are the leader of their business, which is another neat thing that they absolutely love. Talk about growing, like in sports or in business. They just grow to they're the leader of that engineering or manufacturing or procurement, and everybody's listening to them. And so a couple more weeks go by and they're all green. And then we go to the business plan review and we're going through green. And then Mark Fields, who ended up replacing me as the CEO in 2008, he was leading the Americas as a business unit. And he was going through his charts, and up comes a red chart. And it's a launch of a vehicle in Oakville, Canada. And they had some issues with the tailgate, so they stopped production. Because our other goal was on all the products, we had very clear world-class objectives for the quality, the fuel efficiency, the safety, the systems engineering, and the availability and the pricing so that people could afford it. And so he stopped production because we couldn't meet our requirements that way. And so up comes this chart and it's red. And
it's your first red.
It's our first red. And I could feel the air going away, being sucked out. And they're looking at Mark and they're looking at me. And of course, I knew, and they knew, that most businesses, you never bring an issue to your boss, let alone the CEO, unless you have a solution.
Right.
And so no wonder people don't know what's going on and they can't work on the problems because they don't know what the problems are. And it's not psychologically safe. Like I pointed out on the Working Together Leadership and Management System slide, it has to be psychologically safe so people can share and they're not afraid. You don't ever make a joke at anybody else's expense. Never, because you want their hearts and minds and their confidence to be dynamite. And so, so he puts up the red item, and Don, I go like this.
You clapped.
I clapped. And they had never seen a CEO clap like that. And so and they told me later, I didn't know this, but they told me later that they thought that meant that the two doors behind me in the executive conference room of the Ford Motor Company worldwide, two doors were going to open up.
And swallow him.
Two large human beings are going to come in and remove him from and get rid of him. And so I said, Mark, thank you so much. It's so important that we know what the situation is and how can we help. And I said that to the team. And 2 or 3 of the team had a thought to offer them. The quality leader did. The engineering leader had a comment because they had seen something like that before. And they said, we'll get you the data right away and blah, blah, blah. That took, 10, 15 seconds because we're not solving the problems there. We're going through the whole thing. And then we have our special attention meetings. And so the next week, it was the only red. The next week after that, I think it turned yellow. The next week after that, it turned green. And guess what? What the colors look like, Don, following week after they saw his go green, and he was still there. They kept looking at him every week, sitting next to me, going, "Why is he still there? Why is
they were thinking you were like Dr. Evil and
why isn't he fired him?" Yeah. Well, What do you think the 300 charts look like? They look like a rainbow. Green, a lot of green, yellow, and a number of reds. And from that period on, that data flows down through everywhere. The people inside Ford knew it. All the suppliers knew it. All of the journalists knew it. The reporters knew it. They'd ask me questions about it. I mean, every other day I was meeting with them, and I would share with them what the situation was. They had never met anybody that would share the reds going on, and the fact a week or 2 weeks later, that red item turned to yellow and turned to green. So they are watching this whole system of working together. One, know what the issues are, and then solving the issues and staying on track to deliver the products and services and increase the profits, which is something that we really made a big deal of, because profits equals revenue times margins. So great companies create products and services that people want and value. That's the revenue. And simultaneously, the entire team, including all the stakeholders, is working on the margins, which means that we can create those products and services with ever increasing productivity. And that's why you want to profitably grow a business. And that's why at the bottom of the working together leadership and management system chart, you saw people working together to create profitable growth for all. And remember that it says PGA.
All stakeholders and the greater good.
Yeah. And remember, I forgot to tell you, see the PGA there? I was going to tell you, I always tell this to everybody else, that doesn't mean profitable growth does not mean the golf.
Right.
Professional Golf Association. No, it means profitable
growth for all.
Just to get them to laugh, because they all could understand all the financial complications. They could understand profits, revenue times margins, and great companies will improve each one of them 5 to 7%. And so that's why they can grow the business for the good of everybody.
So, Alan, this BPR process, right? Business plan review. You actually even have a review for your family. Tell me about that process.
I'm looking around to see if any of the kids or my wife is here. They want to come and participate. So Nikki and I have been married for 54 years, and we have 5 children and a growing number of grandchildren. And so that was our plan when we first got married, that we wanted to have 5 children, because we both had large families when we grew up. And so I think maybe it was by the time we had our second child, I came home from Boeing one day, and I said to Nikki, this is going great and the kids are great, but we really need to have a business plan review every week, just like we do at Ford, at Boeing. And she said, Alan, this is not Boeing, and we don't need a business plan review. And I said, you're seeing that the house is getting kind of busy with even the 2 kids, and it's going to get really busy with 4. So she said, no, we don't need a business plan review. So I didn't say anything more. And then I waited a week, and then I said to her, okay, honey, I think we need a family plan review every week. And she said, really? And she said, what does the agenda look like? I said, well, the first thing we would do is when we come back from church on Sunday, then all of us, all 5 of us that we're going to have, and us, 7 people, will go through the house, pick up all our own stuff, take it all back to our room or put it in the cubbies. And then what's the next item? I said, then we'll all go back to our room. We'll pick up all of our own laundry, including the parents, take them down to the laundry. I'll help finance 2 washers and 2 dryers for these 7 people, because we want to do all the laundry on one day and not do it all during the week. And then we'll all take all the laundry back down, put them on the kitchen table, and then we'll sort them, because none of us have signed up as a compelling vision to sort laundry when we don't know how to sort all those socks for all these people. And she said, well, that is good, because it would take us less than a minute to sort it. If we have 7 people sorting all their own stuff, then they'll take their stuff back to their room. Then they'll bring their calendar down, And the kids started doing this when they're in kindergarten. And some of them were even attending the meeting, the family meeting, even before that, just because I like to sit around the table. So they bring down their schedule, and then we go around the table, and everybody goes through their schedule. And then they bring up things that they might need some help. Do they need a taxi cab service? Do they need some help with their consulting at school? And then we all take our notes, and I would go back to my assistant at Boeing, and she built it in the schedule, and everybody knew when I would disappear for an hour, and then I'd be back. And so we all could take care of each other. And then she said, "What's next?" I said, "Well, the next one is we'll go through our principles and practices and are working together, and everybody can help each other, talk to each other about what's working and what's not." And one small thing to tell you how that helped everybody learn how to deal with issues in a very positive, nice way is one time, I think it was Molly, had a dance recital, and she was in junior high, I think, or grade school. And as she said during that meeting on the schedule, I need a car ride, and can somebody help me? And Chris, our oldest, had just gotten his driver's license. Said, "Oh yeah, I'd love to drive you." And she said, "Great." And so the following meeting, when we got to that element, she said, "Okay, I have one thing I'd like to bring up. And Chris, I just like you to know that I was really disappointed that you forgot to pick me up. And I just want you to know that I really wanted you to come because I wanted you to see it. But also, even more importantly, I wanted all my friends to meet you and see what a neat person you were and stuff." And I mean, Chris just turned white. And I'm thinking about the way she said that too. See, she learned to say stuff
nicely,
deal with an issue in a positive way, because no one can go after you when you say, hurt my feelings or this or that or everything else. And so he's just turned 48, and I've never seen her ever disappointed again. And then the next to the last item was that we also said, now, if you're going to do something this week, each of you are going to do something that is going to be really neat, and you're going to get some recognition, be sure and tell us ahead of time, because then we can know that and be prepared and support you and stuff.
Great idea. Yeah.
If you're going to do anything like that's not good, like steal something or do drugs or something like that, let us know that too, so that we can handle that also. Now, it didn't solve everything, but it sure helped going through when they grew up in high school.
The FPR, Family Plan Review. I love it.
The Family Plan Review, which is just a version of the Business Plan Review.
I love it.
And every time they get together, they start talking about the Business Plan Reviews and all the fun things that happen. And one time they didn't sound like they had a very good time at this meeting. I said, "Do you guys was there something you didn't like about that? And if so, why did you come to the family meeting?" And Amanda, I think, said, "Dad, do you remember what the last agenda item was on the family meeting?" I said, "No, I don't." He said, "Well, you passed out the allowance. Of course we're going to come to the family meeting." Okay, now,
hold the check to the end.
Every child is having a family meeting every week.
Wow.
And it works exactly like Nikki and I did it from the day we got together before we had children. We were having our family meeting. And we still have one, and all the kids are having it. And so this whole thing, sports, business, your
family,
friends, everything is based on who you are as a person and what you're choosing to do to serve. And to work together with others is the most phenomenal thing you can do to not only create value for everybody else, but to create value for yourself because you're serving.
Alan, I cannot thank you enough for being a corporate competitor with us today.
Well, you're absolutely welcome. And thank you. And thank you for your service.
I learned so much from Alan, and I loved the discussion about the weekly BPRs with his team. They're fascinated by the idea that he was asking the team to look at their operations and offer a red, yellow, or green icon to describe how things were going. And despite the fact that the company was $17 billion in the hole, Alan said no one on the team showed up and would list their situation as either red or yellow. It was all green, right? He knew he had a culture challenge to overcome. How could it be perfect if you're down 17 billion? And finally, when the first person actually put red up on the screen, Alan said he stood back and applauded. He was shifting the culture. They were used to the notion that you're not supposed to come to the CEO with a challenge if you don't have a solution. And that wasn't the way it was in the culture Alan wanted to build. He wanted his team to come to the BPRs with a challenge and the opportunity for the team collectively to solve it. I don't know about you, but I'm better as a result of this episode, and I know you will be too. I appreciate you. I think it's gonna be a contribution to the hotel room.